And YouTube. Hello, everyone. Just checking in if we are live. Let me see. Okay, we are live. Let me turn this down. Greetings, everyone. This is Yoftahe Gabru from the Yoftahe Show from Boston, Massachusetts. Once again, thank you for being here. Usually, we are here on Wednesday night and Saturdays. We had to move today's show to Sunday because of conflicts of some schedules. And Helen had to apologize. She's not able to make it today because she due to illness. So she will be able to join us on a later show. So, Helen, we wish you well. And Salam Eid. Today's program will be in English. And then will be broadcasted on the Yoftahe show and also on YouTube. And then we'll have more broadcasts later on in the week. So today, without further ado, like I have amazing women. This is a topic dear to my heart. I have two girls, 15 years old and 16 years old. And I want them to grow up being independent, being able to make their own future and decide their own outcome in life. Unfortunately, for many girls, especially in Africa, and today we'll talk more about Ethiopia and Eritrea, how the women are not having the same privilege that most of us are able to see, let's say in the US or Europe, because a lot of the women, especially girls, I would say, at the young age are forced out of school. Most places they are allowed to go to school maybe until they turn 10, 11, wherever they call like pre-puberty. And after puberty, they feel like they have to be forced into arranged marriage or take care of the family. A lot of the housework burdens fall most of the time on the girls and women, and being very unfair if education-wise, health-wise, everything that's becoming that we know as a society, so many things that can be wrong in so many places, but most of the burdens end up falling on our girls. So the panelists that I gathered for you today, they don't just speak about it or they don't just feel bad about it. They are here telling us what they are doing to change that route. And I do believe education is key. And for most of our girls being educated and not being forced in an early marriage, sexual abuse, so many things that they are going through, our world will be much better place if we end up educating our girls and invest in our girls. So let me go to our panelists and no orders because I just see you on the screen. So we will go in, but I see I'm going to start first with Jerry. Actually, she's our youth, and she is the next generation that can definitely make a big difference in our society. So, Jerry, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit why this topic, what it means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Yoftahe, for having me. I'm honestly honored to be in a panelist with amazing women who've actually done stuff that have impacted our community. For me, I'm going to be a graduate in about a week, so I will be an alumni where I'll have a degree, educated. So just wanted to start off with that. I grew up in Ethiopia. I moved here when I was about 7 years old. From a young age, I was very, what is the word? I would consider myself very passionate about independence and just kind of seeing the way that we were raised and some of the things that my mom would do or my grandparents would do that I really didn't agree with. So I had a lot of battles with that. And so that kind of led me to understand what it means to study really feminism, what it means to be a feminist, what it means to want a gender equality. In college, I recently did semester-long research about feminism and the struggles with that in terms of religion. My faith is a really big part of who I am. And I'm also learning to merge that into two. I'm a part of a youth program here where we are an Orthodox Toledo youth group, where we come together and we actually had an event recently where, prior to COVID, I should say, we had an event where we gathered women, and we really learned how to love ourselves and to empower ourselves and just be there for each other. Sometimes it's hard to learn to love yourself in a society that might shame you for that, or might not understand what it means to embrace yourself. So we've really done that kind of stuff. And then I'm very involved with our community here, our Dallas community, who's created a platform for the youth to really come together and learn from our older generation and learn from the movements that they're making, so we can get involved and really make a difference back home. So I might not have a lot of projects working, but I am more than ready to kind of take on those projects and kind of show the youth that we can make a difference out there. So yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. It's like, you have a lot to offer, because all the ladies that are talking about what they're doing, what their project they are doing, they're going to need someone like you to be able to run it. So right. You are here at the right place. So I really appreciate that you are here, and we're going to come back to you. So Tamara, let me come to you. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. And again, also, thank you for inviting Studio Samuel to have a voice here today. I'm Tamara, founder of Studio Samuel. And before I share my story, what I always do is I make it very clear that where we work is in very impoverished communities. So my story, my experience, our girls' stories, it's really specific to that community. My stories don't represent all of Ethiopia. So I want everybody to know that. So why Ethiopia and why girls? My husband and I adopted our beautiful son from Ethiopia. And in that process, I wanted to educate myself as much as I could. We were going to be traveling a few times during the process. I've traveled a lot. I've been to developing countries, but I wanted to know more about Ethiopia. In that process, like, something shifted for me. And it was because I wanted to dive into the community and hear from the people and learn about the culture to build stories for my son. But what happened is, as much as I prepared myself, I wasn't prepared for what the reality of extreme poverty looks like when you become friends with people who were born into it. And it affects boys, absolutely. But what I saw it do to girls is the common thread is that they were denied an education. And when they were denied an education, they were stripped of safe options. And the options weren't their options. The story that triggered it for me was a friend of mine. She became my friend, a young girl who was sold into trafficking. And it was her parents who were saving the money. And she was saving money to make this happen because they saw it as an option. And that was such a learning curve for me, because I became close to her and to her family, and to see what they had to go through, and then what she went through on her own as a young girl. Like, nobody's equipped for this, but a young girl on her own in a strange country, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse. She was pushed out of a third-story window in the hospital, returning to her village because she was of no more use to this family she was placed with in the trafficking situation, returned to her village, and then she was labeled a prostitute because word had spread of the sexual abuse. And that's how I met her. Her family had to ask her to move. And I ended up in the city where I was at the time. And I think the most heart-wrenching part of the story that stayed with me and really planted the seed for Studio Samuel is that when I saw her in the city and she was working, and I thought she'd overcome so much, and I was so proud of her. And she said, "Don't be proud of me. I'm working here to save my money to go back." And she thought that she would have possibly a different outcome if she had a different broker. Maybe she would be placed with a different family, but that was her option. And when I asked her, why would you do this? And she very matter-of-factly said, what are my options? This is my option. And she was right. So it was that moment that I wanted to do something to give back when I was ready. This was in the middle of the adoption process. So I came home. I'm not from the international development world. I'm from the entertainment industry, but I've lived in New York long enough. It was, I knew enough people to get something together and just to start small. The goal was to reach one girl, create a platform that was teach a woman to fish, give girls, not give girls, where they could create their own options from a life skills and education platform. So that is my story.
Thank you, Tamara. We do appreciate you. Rebecca, let me come to you right now. This is your second time on the Yoftahe show, so I do appreciate you. You're one of the women actually every single time I talk about how society should move forward with the school that you're building and how you're being involved. You've been like an inspiration for me. So thank you very much again for being here. So if you can, for those people who don't know you, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, for inviting me a second time. And you obviously should count yourself among the group of people who have started something. This is important that you've created the show for the Ethiopian community. So I thank you for that. And others have said it's an honor to be on this panel with the rest of you. And I can tell already that we're going to have a great conversation. And to echo what Tamara started with, which is, I think we may each be speaking to different experiences. And my experience of Ethiopia is that there's so many places where we can intervene. So I hope that all of that is taken in as opportunities. It's just a disparate set of experiences. I too grew up in Ethiopia. Unlike Jerry, I am not a soon to be a high school graduate, although I did leave also right when I was 11. So I've really grown up in the States, and it's very clear to me that education is what allowed me to make my own way. We came here right when the Derg came, so we came as refugees with nothing. And really that's what's allowed me to rebuild a life and be in a position to give something back to Ethiopia. So a few years back, I wanted to be on the ground in Ethiopia. And as I spoke to different people, it became clear very quickly that education is a perfect place to intervene, to both support civil society, to support positive health outcomes, to support business growth, all of it. But there's really a need for this form of education. So we are starting a co-ed. We are educating boys as well, and we can talk more about boys as allies in this work. Sort of kids of talent recruited from around the country, which feels particularly important right now, to really ask them to be, give them what they need to have to sort of own their education, own their agency, and really be the ones that drive solutions, because there's a limit to what we can do from abroad. We are not sort of the frontline responders. So kids there really see what's needed. They understand how to intervene. And really what is missing is to give them world quality education combined with contextual specificity and agency. And I think for me, it's incredibly exciting to see what's going to come next. Our school, we've, as Tamara knows, we put it together over the course of a very challenging year. But we have 38 amazing applicants that are starting this momentarily as soon as they take the 8th grade exam. So we're opening January 11th. This first year, they're all attending on scholarship. In the future, we'll have hopefully a mix of scholarship and fee-paying students, but really we've been fundraising in the States to make that possible. An excellent faculty, founding administration that we can talk about, but that is the vision, to have 400 kids really be equipped to be world, everything that they need to be problem solvers and leaders for Ethiopia going forward.
Thank you, Rebecca. Munit, and I do appreciate you for being here also. You are like one of the voices. You don't just say about it, but you act on it. You have created a lot of YouTube channels or different programs that you are doing, and you're moving culture that usually like just not an entertainment, that that's how the message most of the time gets out. So you have done an amazing job in all that. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself with the people who might not know you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here with this amazing group of talented, brilliant, hardworking women that are making things better for people and plan to make things better for people. My name is Munit Mesfin. I am at this moment a singer-songwriter, an educator. I'm a teaching artist, and I've done a lot of things around arts, culture, and particularly around the arts and culture for positive social change. So I was born in Ethiopia, then lived around the world. I was raised by a woman who was one of those pioneering first of her kinds. She was she's a public health officer. Her name is Dr. Tobich Bishau. I cannot be here talking about girls, education, empowerment, women's rights without mentioning my mother's name, because she was one of those women who dared and challenged status quo. This is about now 50 years ago. just literally challenging institutions like the Ethiopian University and challenging systems, saying, why can't women be whatever they desire to be if they have the capacity to do so? Why would you tell me that I can't when I know I can? And then with her story, I just have to mention it briefly. She wanted to be a public health officer, and they told her that as a woman, all she could be was maybe a hygienist or a nurse. And she said, well, what I want to be is a public health officer. So she had to go to the university senate and argue her case for a year or two. Finally, they said, fine, but if you fail, then we're not going to let any other women in. And then she said, why? When men fail, does that mean that all men can't come in? Why would you make the burden on me now to succeed and be if I succeed, they can, and if I don't, they cannot. My failure should be my failure as much as a man's failure should be his. So this is a woman that knows her rights. She was brought up at a time when educating women was something that just some enlightened fathers might want to do. Her and her sister grew up in Jimma, and they were the first girls to graduate from high school there. So I was brought up with that kind of a woman, and my father he's a scientist, a soil scientist, and was basically clear of the fact that whatever you want to do, just do it. There wasn't really anything that bound me. I left Ethiopia when I was 10, lived around the country in India. India is a very good place to learn about gender inequity. It's a very difficult place to be a girl. We were there at a time when, girl infanticide was still a possibility and very, very real, where girl children would be killed either right after they're born or try to be aborted because it was such a burden to have a girl child because of things like dowry, and just India was a very huge education place as well. Then I went to Namibia for a couple of years, where violence against women was one of the most prevalent things at that point. At that point, Namibia had just gained its independence from South Africa. It used to be Southwest Africa prior to being Namibia, and there was a lot of post-colonial, post-apartheid chaos that was in the country, where a lot of people were, for decades and decades, had been oppressed by, if you're Black, you live here, and this is your capacity, and this is your education, and this is your, even in prison, calorie count. If you're colored, this is what you can do, and if you're white, this is what you can be. And when I got there was a lot of unemployment, and there was a lot of desperation, and a lot of just poverty. And somehow what that also meant was there was a lot of alcohol abuse and a lot of abuse by men of women. So there was a lot of that kind of context. My mother works with UNICEF, so that's Children and Women's Health. I went to Smith College, which is an all-women's college, and you mentioned feminism. Well, Smith College and feminism is very much hand in hand. And when I left Smith, not a few years ago, but now, a while back, the first full-time job that I had was with this organization called Women for Women International, based out of DC. And what Women for Women International works with is women in post-conflict countries. So in the DRC, Nigeria, and when I left South Sudan, around the Darfur area was opening, in Afghanistan and Iraq and Bosnia, Serbia. And so it was in places where the most grotesque kind of violences had been had occurred. Things like genocide was something that happened. Things like rape as a strategy for war and conflict had happened in these places. Sexual slavery had happened in these places. So what that organization tried to do was basically reestablish these women and try to encourage them to have faith in the system again, but also really giving them financial support. It was a sponsorship program where women, mostly from the United States, but also later on from Europe, would send monthly sponsorship monies to women in these countries. And I was the program, I was responsible for the African countries, Nigeria, Rwanda, DRC, for a brief moment for Afghanistan and Iraq as a project coordinator. So it was really about sending the money from here for them to then empower themselves through small businesses. It could be soap making, it could be animal husbandry, it could be textiles, it could be whatever it is, but really about getting them together as well to heal from the conflict, to heal from the violence. And it was one of the most eye-opening kind of contexts for me to see what conflict and war meant in a society, and how much women and children carry the burden of it, and how much the rebuilding of a society is based on their fortitude and on their strength of character, because they are basically the pillars of society, and not a cute, like, oh, they're pillars of society. It is true. They are the pillars of society. And seeing that impact was tremendous. Finally, I moved to Ethiopia for about 7 years prior to returning back to the States a few years ago. And when I was there, As an artist, I was performing and doing my thing, so that does its own thing. I'm also a mother of 2 girls, so that also is a responsibility. But while I was there, a project was started through this movement called the Girl Effect movement, which is something that the Nike Foundation does. And the Girl Effect movement is a very specific, focused thing that says if you educate a girl, it is the smartest economic move that you can make. If you keep a girl in school, if you avoid early childhood marriage, if you create networks that support her, if you can do whatever you can to influence the gatekeepers in society to shift their paradigm and to shift their thinking about girls, to think of educating a girl not like you're going to destroy the culture and the society, but that you're empowering your community, you're empowering your family, and you're creating a lot of possibilities for everybody, not just for her, but for everybody. When that project started, they were looking for somebody to do the creative directing for the music part. So I was there from basically the launch of this project, which was called Yenya, which means ours. It is by us and it's for us. And so it started first as a radio drama. I was there from the auditioning of the women that were the voice actors and the singers to kind of really crafting what is the message that we're going to do, to doing focus groups with the community, with girls, to understand their needs, because like mentioned, it's not for us to tell them what they need, it's for them to tell us where the gaps are in their lives. And so doing those kinds of things to kind of say, we can now use the arts as a social change tool, because it really is a matter of mindset. It is about how we think about girls and what we think girls are capable of and how we think educating them, because at the end there is a belief that educating a girl is somehow risky or it's not a worthwhile endeavor. So fixing that process, that thought process, and no, fixing it, it's just shifting it. It's a thought process. We have to shift it because, everything is dynamic. Human rights are human rights. Girls are humans. And so that's something that we needed to push forward. So that project is still ongoing. It went from a radio drama into being a TV drama. And really, it's about using all of our storytelling tools, all of our marketing tools, all of our music tools to push the message that the smartest thing a country can do for itself, the smartest thing we can do as a community, is to let a girl live her life and in freedom to choose her path and to fulfill her potential, because her potential, her impact is tremendous. Even as we see all of the women that go to be maids in Middle Eastern countries, they suffer so much, but they also build so much. You see how much they transform their community. So even in the worst case scenarios, they're there doing the hard labor to transform their communities. But this was about making sure that we enable them to stay in Ethiopia and be those people that can fulfill their potential without having to be immigrants, without having to be in precarious situations where their rights are constantly being abused, where they're being basically almost imprisoned and enslaved in some contexts. So that was the project that took up most of my time when I was in Ethiopia. Even when I moved to the States, I would go back and continue to consult and work with that. Now I'm more focused on the younger age group around children. And I think that's a lot of also where you make impact. As I have younger children, I'm doing a lot of things around early childhood education and developing myself as somebody who works on promoting early childhood education as a place where we can really shift the way girls and definitely boys, because without boys on board, there's very little that can be done. Our boys need to also grow up feeling that they are just one part of the whole, not the part, not number one, just one part of the whole that makes society. So working on early childhood education, creating this year, particularly working on content development for something that I'm launching next year, which is really pushing and educating our children to understand and to see each other from all angles, on gender, on ethnicity, on race, whatever it might be, all the different isms and schisms that we have, to kind of be focused on a very human rights centered approach, which is the biggest legacy that my mother gave me, was human rights centeredness. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. So we'll unpack a lot of things that you have mentioned in there. So we'll go through that and divide it. Well, one of the sometimes data is good for all of us to understand. And there was something that says, did you know? It's like one girl under age 15 is married every 7 seconds. Every 7 seconds. Let's just think about it. We've been here like about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Can you imagine how many 15-year-olds have been married just every 15 seconds? Girls are 3 times more likely to be out of school. Girls are 2 times more likely to die from malnutrition. Girls are 2 times more likely to be subjected of sexual violence. And girls are 2 times more likely to be coerced into trafficking, sex trafficking all over the world. And this is not, sometimes we think like it doesn't happen in America or Europe. It does even happen here, not only like where we consider Africa or Asia type of thing. So it does happen. So this is a very sensitive topic. This is something that we all have a part to be able to do something. For me, why I get involved, I mentioned my 2 girls earlier, and I have been raised. I mean, most of you have talked about your mother. Like for me, my mother has been that core person. She's been independent. She traveled. She worked at the UN. So she did so many things that as a woman sometimes is considered not being able to do that. So that has given me even the privilege, the feeling, the thinking of saying that my mom is able to do it at that age. There should not be any other girls should not be able, should have the same kind of opportunity. She loves education, she loves traveling, and she has been all over the world. And she's been an independent woman that I always strive to. So I learned the strength from my mom. So from all of you, you have a personal story, and everything that you do, what made you who you are, if I come to it. So I'll start, Jerry, with you, because we all have, like, I mean, one of the data shows if a mother is educated, it's 50% more that the children that she'll have will also be educated. So it does have an influence how we grow up, where we come from. So to be who you are, how have you been influenced? Who is your influence, Jerry, if I can start with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I look at a lot of my mom as well as my grandmas, like on both my mom and my dad. I'm a communication major, so I love to talk and just sit and just ask questions. And sometimes, like, to the point where they're like, "Arataying, like, leave me alone, like that's too much." Or like in our culture might be, you don't ask those kind of questions. But I'm like, that's history. Like, I need to know what you went through so I can learn from it, and I don't, and I'm grateful for the privilege that I have. So for both of my grandparents, or for my grandmas, they were both married at a very young age, and it was unwanted. And for me, growing up here, that was something I never heard of. Like, that was something that blew my mind at a young age. I was like, what do you mean? Like, you didn't want to, but why? And I couldn't comprehend that to survive for them, that's what they had to do. And I come from, my mom as well. She's married at a very young age, but she is someone who just instilled in me the importance of education, because she didn't necessarily have that opportunity. And so that was something she's always wished she had. And so hearing those stories from generations, it just kind of not just motivated me, but really pushed me to stay on my education and understand the privileges that I have, the privileges that we do have, that I didn't grow up where, I had to worry about the food, or where I had to get married in order to survive, to help my family, make, to stand up on their own 2 feet. So I think not just my mom, but both my grandmas, like, it's incredible. And I know a lot of the youth, when they talk about their grandparents and their stories, there's power in that. And there's a reason that we sit through them and we listen to those years of history.
Tamara, who is your inspiration? Who made you who you are?
At an early age, definitely my grandmother. She grew up in the Great Depression, and they made it a priority that we were going to college, and that wasn't common for that generation. My mother had me at a young age. She stayed in college, and again, made us all very clear we were all going to college. And now, as a grown woman, I would say a huge inspiration is my mother-in-law. She grew up in the civil rights movement in the South. And I mentioned earlier, my son goes to school in New York. It's the Ella Baker School. And my mother-in-law had a lot to do with Ella Baker. And she remained in Ella Baker's group, SNCC. She's very powerful in that. And all of these women, the 3 of them, they show you what can happen when a woman knows her voice matters and when she uses it.
Thank you. Rebecca, same question for you. Who was your inspiration?
Thank you. Well, I grew up in Ethiopia. My mother and all of my aunts were in college. So definitely the background that I came from was middle class, clearly going to college. When I think about my life and coming here, my dad was a leading academic that some people probably know. He was sort of founding the Amharic department at the university. So it was never an option that we wouldn't go to college. It was never an option that we would fail. I've always thought of myself as part of a web that despite the fact that we came here with nothing, it was still strong enough to support what was coming. So I would say my parents, my family are definitely my inspiration. But I will also say that as I think about what we're doing at the school, I think of how I could have been different if some of the things that I know now I had known then. So I've learned, for example, many things about how much brain space women, girls, immigrants, outsiders use getting over obstacles, solving problems, finding their places, which is mental capacity that we could have been using toward pursuing other dreams, avenues, inspiration. So as we think about our school and the environment that we're going to set there, we think deeply about community and what we need to do so the girls feel like it is their place on day one, that they're very comfortable taking risks. So, and that I think is the foundational piece that we need to allow people to grow into their full potential. So I was cared for, I wasn't going to fall, I was going to go to college, people inspired me. But it's clear to me now, all the stuff that I had to overcome and all the challenges that I felt that I needed to deal with on my own because we were outsiders, because I was a woman, because all of those things. So it's really exciting to me to imagine a different type of education which people will come into and really can blossom in ways that you can't even see at the outset.
Thank you. I mean, every time that you and I talk, I mean, I always remember like how privileged. I mean, I went to school called French school lycée, so it was a completely different world. Sometimes I feel like I lived in Europe, the little Europe, and still in Addis Ababa. So some of the things that I never really had to really experience at the time because my mom also traveled. So we had things that most of others did not have. So giving back, it's just a big thing for me, just understanding that I did not see most of the things that sometimes now that is very exposed. So I really can't understand when you mentioned about your experiences. So Munit, I mean, I know you mentioned earlier about your mom, but if you want to add anything on that, what's your inspiration? Who makes you who you are?
I mean, definitely I was also raised by my mother as a single mother for most of my life. So it was my mother and I that traveled from place to place. So it was with her that I went to India when she was with UNICEF, and then Namibia. And then I came here as a teenager, first to boarding school, then to college, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think what I took from her were a few things, which is one, really truly being focused on human rights as her source of everything. So in terms of how you see people, in terms of how you treat people, in terms of how communities should be and based and should be, how society should be based on, was not about anything of nationalism, was not so much about ethnicity, it was not so much about anything else except for human rights orientation, people-centered and human rights. And those words were drummed into me ever since I was a child. So I think that really did a lot for me to fully understand that as a human being, everything is expected from me and everything is possible in me just because I was a human being. Again, very few limitations were put on me, except for obviously as a girl child, you weren't able to go and play outside. So I think when I was 8 or 9, I threw a tantrum and wanted to be a boy because our entire neighborhood was known by my brother's name. Oh, Jorga's house, Jorga's mother, Jorga's sister. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I exist. Where am I in this context? So there was always, the tantrum of 8 and 9-year-old girls wanting to be the voice, but I was also shy, so I didn't really truly mind. But I think deep down on my insides, I always knew that there really wasn't anything I wasn't allowed to do. It wasn't so much about an allowed. It was more a matter of figuring out how to get it done. Definitely now seeing my girls is very inspiring. They're 6 and 9 years old. They're fearless. They are the most fearless people I've ever met. I was not like them as a child. I was a lot more timid. So seeing their potential and understanding that every child should have that fearlessness. Every child should have that ability to move around the world with that sense of, I can, and I will, without having to hesitate. And the fact that we are a product of luck, we were lucky enough to be born in contexts that are, and we were lucky enough to have had an environment or a situation or circumstance that enabled us to not have been in a much more, difficult predicament. So I always consider myself, extremely lucky to have been born of the parents that I was born. And I always consider the fact that I could have been anybody else too. I could have been born in a context where there was no school near me, where I was in a rural context, where I had to do all the burden of the housework and I had to raise my children and I had to sacrifice myself for their benefit because I was told that could have been me too, just as much. So I think my mother growing up in Jimma and having to have, she kind of lived both worlds of being like, the girl who takes care of everything. They'll go and they'll do things around the farm. There'll be there were two older sisters that were then mothering all the children that came underneath them. And there was about 8 kids. So there was a lot of mothering that these girls did do, but they still went through that and passed that and went to school and took all of that seriously. And also then became these professional, extremely wonderful, achieving kind of human beings too. So her stories have been really, really helpful in always putting in context the fact that I happen to have been born to these people in this context, but had I not been, I would have been maybe a different outcome. And everybody should have the chance to be fully who they are and to have choices, to make mistakes, to fail, to succeed, whatever it might be, but at the same time, to at least have that choice. And, when it comes to having, my grandmother had 10 kids when she was starting 16 years old, and that's normal then. And unfortunately, it's still the reality for just too many of our girls. And I had my first child in my mid-20s, and I know how much it transforms a person to have a child. And even as a mid-20s person, imagine being a teenager. It's a ridiculous kind of burden. It's a huge burden, particularly when it's not born of choice. So I think definitely I would have to give a lot of credit for my mother for being the person that she was, for living the life that she did, for showing by action, not just the words, but just by action. And then for my daughters being who they are and me feeling completely responsible to ensure that I can do everything I can to make them stay that way. Stay safe, stay secure, stay protected, stay unabused, stay brave, stay all of those things. It's a lot of responsibility parenting girls. And I have a son too, and it's been a lot of educating him about what a good man needs to be and how a good man has to be. So a lot of that is something that I completely inherited from my mother.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this question for all of you, so jump in. So just being born a girl versus a son, there's by itself brings in a lot of burden. We've been touching it up since we started. So, for me, I mentioned earlier, I was to a French school. The smartest students in my school were the girls. So I never told a girl cannot do anything. Most of my friends right now from lycée, kudos to all of them. I really am inspired by a lot of girls. So I never thought that a girl cannot do anything because they were the smartest in our school. But outside that compound, it's a completely different world. And what are we missing? If from all of you, Jerry, I'll start with you and going in. Is there, especially I know all of us talked about how our mothers, our education, or our like family helped us in that. But if we looked at the whole world setting, girls seems to be affected in a lot. So is it because we don't talk about it? Is it because it's hidden? Or is it just as a society, why is it we think most of the burdens just falls on girls? It doesn't mean there are a lot of boys, like I said, who are going also through that, but just by being a girl, there is that extra layer as a burden that's out there. So I'm going to ask the same question to all of you. Your thing, you can add, you can jump in between. So I'll start with Jerry, Tamara, Rebecca, and Munit, but you can jump in between. So Jerry, your floor.
Yeah, I definitely think we don't talk about it enough. I think now we're, with the feminist movement and the Me Too movement and kind of just with social media, it's beginning to be a conversation. But I think we, for many years, have just kind of, society has just made it the norm and accepted it and really hasn't brought significant change. There's been change, but not to the point, not to the degree where we're seeing it continue. So I think that could be a factor. In terms of back home, I also think, especially back home, that's just the norm. Like, that's just something you do, right? That's just like, you're the mom, you're expected to do this, this, this. You're supposed to, traditionally, you're supposed to learn how to cook, or you're supposed to be the one staying at home. And that's just what we as like young girls see and we kind of accept. And we're not, I don't think we've been given the opportunity to kind of challenge that as a society as a whole. I think we're more advanced here in the Western world. So I think that might be some of the factors I would say.
Okay. Tamara, same question. Like I said, anything you want to add? Do you see the world having more requirements or more burden on girls?
I think I'll speak specifically to our community and what we see. I see that I think a lot is economic in our area. We have a girl who, for example, child marriage. The boys, if there's an opportunity to go to school, it will likely be the boys who will be going from the family, because fast forward, when a job is available, they might make more money than the girl. Manual labor, a boy is physically stronger, usually, not always, but they can work in the field, they can work manual labor, they can get a job. The girl, that leaves her either at home, or if the family, going back to our student, if the family can't provide the most basic needs, that's where we see child marriage come in, because it's economic, it's an exchange, it's a transaction, and it's a girl, and it's a transaction. And that's why with our program, we're seeing girls, you can break your poverty cycle in one generation. And it's not a tagline, it's not to catch attention, it's really happening when a girl has access to education. Because when we see this young girl, I don't share their names, but this one girl, she saw her sister, who was 14, get married, and she knew the same was going to happen to her if she stayed. So she opted to go into a child labor situation in the city. She left the rural area, went to the city, and found a home to do child labor in, and they guaranteed that she could go to school, and that's all she wanted, was to go to school. And she couldn't use light at night, and she was still trying to figure out how to do her homework. She stayed in school. She wasn't getting the right meals as the children in the home were, because she was an outsider. She worked so hard in this situation to stay in school, and school was her focus. She ended up getting a scholarship, and she's now in college studying laboratory sciences. And her daughter will go to school. Her son will go to school. Her son will know that a girl's voice matters, that a girl belongs in school. So I think so much is economic, and it's at nobody's fault. Right now during COVID, we have small business. We did a microloan program for the girls' caregivers, because if the caregiver works, then the girl can stay in school. So many are going into default right now with their microloans. The caregivers are, and they're ashamed, and they shouldn't be. We have major corporations in the US who can't pay. And so we're trying to get to these caregivers and say, listen, it's not your fault. The loans will be forgiven, and we know you want to work. And what's happening is I just got this report last week. We've seen a few of them now end up in commercial sex work. And these are women who would never have done that. It's to keep food on the table. And again, it's economic. It's really hard. And the most vulnerable are always the ones most affected when there's a tilt in things are skewed from the norm.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that one a little bit, because that's a topic by itself. So this is sexual abuse and the sex work, how much it affects the society. So Rebecca, do you think just being born a girl, does it bring its own burden more than being born as a boy?
There's no question. And again, it's different in different contexts. But to pick up on what Tamara said, it's economic, and it's also a question of power. And there are power arrangements that benefit. This existing status quo needs to be challenged at all levels. So if we step back and look at the United States, we have elected for the first time, our first vice president is a woman. It's 46th president. So this is a long time coming. If you look across leadership in the states, we still are maybe 20%, I think, of our congressional delegations are female. So there's a long way to go in terms of power. I have 3 children. 2 of them are girls, and I have a boy. Both of my girls go to great, one just graduated. She's actually volunteering in Ethiopia this year. Great girls' schools, independent girls' school here. My son goes to a co-ed school. We talk all the time about girls' leadership. So their context, their surround sound is one which is attentive to leadership, to equality, to all the bits of messaging that girls receive. A lot of the media images. So where you started out, Adam, is saying the girls are smart. It's not enough to be smart by itself when that sort of takes it to the individual, but there's an entire system that we have to think about and where we can make a difference to make that world easier for these girls. So it's not just they're working super hard and spinning their wheels, but also we are making systematic changes so that effort finds its natural place, that women don't have to work twice as hard. So there's no question that leadership, economic power, all of those things currently in the West, let alone in a country like Ethiopia, are not equal by any means. So the fact that, when we have examples of women, the accomplished women on this panel list who have done so well, that's not by itself enough. Each of us are fantastic, I'm great, but it also is, as somebody else said earlier, an element of luck associated with where we ended up. And what's really exciting is to imagine what everybody could do if we could create a more level playing field and to see where people would go. So the media images, the expectations, my sister is a very accomplished scientist, and she and I were with one of my aunts. They adore us. They love us. They're wonderful to us. And we were somewhere, and it was either my husband or her husband had to go get his own coffee. And my aunt said, "When do you my kabar batagar?" It basically means what a terrible country in which men aren't properly honored. So it's kind of in the back of the mind, what is the expectation? And then if you layer in that childbearing, even the most egalitarian relationships, because the work of taking care of children inevitably comes to women. I went to an anniversary. I graduated from Harvard Law School, and we had a big sort of meeting for all the women lawyers to see what had happened, where had people gone. And currently, law school enrollment is more than 50% women. First-year associates, it's more than 50% women. But the partnership levels still fall off because the question, what happens when women have kids, has still not been resolved. So at that point, people step out of the cycle. So the partnership ranks are still predominantly male. So there's a big assumption around childbearing responsibilities and child caring responsibilities and where that falls. So there's no question that it is. We have a long way to go on all fronts. Contexts are different. It's very different in different places. We're not talking about what Tamara is talking about. Those girls are dealing with something very basic and very specific. But for all women, I think it's not an even playing field, not yet.
Definitely. So, Munit, you want to add anything? Just like Rebecca.
Sure. I mean, I hate to be that Smithy that goes, it's the patriarchy. But I mean, at the end of the day, there is a superstructure that's above everything else, and it's in our religion. It's in, there was goddess at some point, and then there's God the Father at some point. Along the way, there's things that happen, but there is a lot to be said about overall the overarching feeling of how responsibilities are divvied up. Like mentioned, definitely child rearing, child caring, being more around the domestic sphere, the private domestic sphere is the role of women out there into the world, warrioring, hunting, gathering, beyond. I mean, there's something really fundamental about from that point forward and then moving onwards into different dynamics and different transfigurations that we are here. From, yes, where I'm sure it probably is some Scandinavian country that's gotten it the best in terms of like women's equality or something along the lines, but it does require a lot of correction every step of the way, from early childhood education, what we're from every language that we're using around our children and what each child is able to do. From, I mean, hate to say it, but literally from who gets more food on their plate, from that kind of fundamental thing. Because food on the plate is nutrition. Nutrition is how well can you function physically? How well can your brain work? How well can, it's like a physiological, psychological, spiritual, social layer after layer after layer that has basically cocooned women. And we have to really work really, really hard to break out of that. And every time we break out of that, I mean, I remember after being away from Ethiopia for 20 years is when I returned. Was it 20 or 15 years or so that I returned back there? And I was doing, what I was normally doing, living, birthing, mothering. My husband and I have a very real partnership in the sense when I was here and I had my son, he was working and I was home with him because I couldn't give him up after 6 weeks to daycare, which is what family I mean, think about it. In the United States of America, I didn't realize what that meant until I had my child. And it's, you want to go back to work? 6 weeks later, give your child to daycare. And I mean, in Ethiopia, for 40 days, you're not even allowed to move with your child. You're outside, like you're not even supposed to like open a curtain, and I'm supposed to like walk away and be fully functional. And I remember thinking, yeah, I could. Yes, I could. But then, do I want to? I mean, does he even recognize my face? Have I imprinted in his eyeballs to give him away? So, I mean, at that moment, I decided to stay home. When we were in Ethiopia, my husband was staying home and I was working. So our partner, I'm very lucky to have found a person that says, okay, I'll do it. And then you do what you do. That is exceptional. And I understand that. But from day one of birth, the language that we use around our girls, the way that we see them, in terms of, again, what a boy will be able to do and how the society perceives that a boy will be the one that will go out there. He will carry my name is one of the things in some societies, right? He carries my name. So therefore, I need to invest in him that carries my name because she won't. That's one of the contexts in some places I've been in where it was really shocking. Like, why should I take care of my girl child? She's not even going to carry my name. So it's in everything, in a lot of things, that patriarchal sense of, through the father, through the boy child, that's where your investment should be, because that's where the biggest outcome is going to be, is a true belief system that we have. What girls should and should not wear, what girls should and should not say, where they can and cannot speak. A lot of these things are told to us in very polite ways, in very sweet ways, over coffee, over lunch, over dinner, whatever. We hear it all the time. If you disagree with it all the time, another label will be added to you, and that's how you're going to live your life, like as a rebel, as somebody who's just completely anti-cultural and anti-society and whatever it might be. But I think there's definitely, through generations and generations, the resistance has always been there, but it continues to grow louder and larger within the context of the African context, African feminism. Yes. Not necessarily taking what is Western feminism and just plastering on top, but really saying, in terms of the labor that women do, in terms of how women spend money versus how men spend money, what it means for the community, understanding those kinds of real things and understanding the numbers, how the majority of smallholder farmers are women, and really understanding how much economic power they do have every day, and how much education is based on us educating our children on a first step and level. So you see that there's going to continue to be more resistance, because you have half the world that is consistently having to battle against limitation after limitation. Here, it might be a question of, like now in COVID, the majority of the kinds of work that women go into, the kind of businesses they open, the service orientation of women, and how they end up losing more of those businesses because that's just the orientation that we've been given. It could be about how much to $1 a woman makes. It could be like, was mentioned by Rebecca, how many people go from first year, yes, you're doing really great as law students, to being partners. All of the sacrifices that we are also, we're trained, whether we want to or not, even when we're raised by the most empowered women, there's still a part of us that sacrifices more than our brothers. Our brothers do. Definitely. There is just a thing in us that is really like, well, I got to do it, I guess that will be me that will be going and taking myself out of the workforce, if it is for a few years because I have to, or making myself the part-time person so that my husband can be the full-time person because he has more income, because that's the patriarchal context that we live in at the moment. So there's so many, I feel it like a cocoon. It's like this feeling, and then you're constantly battling against it and pushing out to create some space and some wiggle room. But when it comes to fundamental things, from who gets to eat first to who gets to go to school, who is forced to marry to who is not. I mean, it is the girl child that does a lot of the burden carrying. Yeah.
It's like, I agree with you. So you bringing us to the next question we're going to talk about next, about partnership. What we hear from our father, what can I do as a father myself? Even sometimes even the mothers, what they say to their kids, because that's how they grew up, the culture they inherited. And most of the mothers, even I see it in their language, reserving and telling girls how they should act, where they should be thinking about. So we'll talk about that. Before we get to that, we'll talk, let me show you a video about our one of our sponsors. Let's see, and then we'll go to the next discussion.
ትንሽ የሚባሉ አጋጣሚዎች ህይወትን ያሳምራሉ። መኖር እድሜ መቁጠር ብቻ አይደለም፣ እያንዳንዷን ደቂቃ ማጣጣም እንጂ። ሴንቸሪ ሞል ግራውንድ ላይ እንገኛለን። አይዛክ ቤዝመን
Isaac Pageman, they make like the most amazing watch that I have seen, and I own one of them. If you go online and order from them and put the Yoftahe show, you'll be able to get a discount from getting it. They make it beautiful Amharic words, and then for the numbers that they make them. So Isaac Pageman, don't forget to visit them. I was just mentioning about what me as a father, the language Monique just shared it earlier, the language we use, the kind of lesson that we give our girls, what they can and cannot do is instilled from childhood. And then at a certain age, if they are told that they cannot do certain things, they may limit themselves because if they don't know, they don't know. So the main thing I want to discuss as a partnership and the culture around us, what's preventing us and not, because we need boys also to be educated when they are around girls, what they can and can't tell them, like certain toys we play with, certain games we play, certain society where we are supposed to fit in certain kind of box society or culture has already put in. And then you don't want to be, how do I call it, outside of that culture group. If you try to send your girls to school, even as a father, you may be looked at in certain society as a weak person or not following the culture. So, Jerry, I'll come back to you. It's like, I mean, what are the language that you hear around you? And then what do you think the partnership looks like in your age group? Do you still hear? Because for us, we may have heard it like what girl cannot do, but what is the language? What is the environment looks like around your age group that's preventing still a girl from accomplishing what she wants to do?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing for us right now, because a lot of my, friends are kind of finishing college, getting into the workforce, and now we're hearing a lot of those conversations. Oh, it's time for you to get married. This is the age, that typical conversation that most Habeshas can relate with. And that's very frustrating for a lot of my girlfriends and I. Even last night we were just discussing this and how kind of the new generation, we really want to learn ourselves first, like understand who we are in order to, like, it just breaks. I just can't comprehend how a person could get in a relationship with someone where they don't know themselves yet. And that, that comes from joining the workforce and like leaving home and kind of knowing who you are, being independent, traveling and doing all of those things. And, now we're seeing a lot of the younger generation embracing that and finding their identity. And, using their voice. And those are the kind of conversations, I think for the guys, it's also different conversations for them, because there is pressure on them to be a certain way, to provide, to, be that traditional man that's kind of put in front of them. And so there's that kind of frustration with both genders, and where we're both trying to figure it out and still deal with like the traditional upbringing that we come with, where we hear things like, you're not supposed to sit like that. A woman's not supposed to like that. A lady's supposed to cook. No man's going to want you if you don't know how to cook, which is very, very toxic to tell children. It is, please don't do that as a father. And I am grateful that my dad did not do that. I remember telling my parents, like, just a couple years ago, I was like, I don't really want to get married. Like, I don't know. I just, I'm a kid. I'm just thinking stuff. And my mom was like, almost had a heart attack, right? And my dad was like, that's fine. If you don't want to. He was like, I would want grandkids, but if you don't, that's your choice. And I've never been so proud to have a father that embraced that. And just, I know I have the option to do it, but for him to say it, it just made me feel so empowered. And to know that you're right. Like, I don't have to abide by what society tells me I'm supposed to do as a woman. I can redefine that and choose however I decide to do. So those are the kind of conversations we need to have. And especially for like the moms, just teaching our girls to really love themselves. Like, I teach Sunday school. I have a lot of girls that I just see a lot of the insecurities or like just not understanding themselves and just their physical attributes. And so just telling, your daughter, like, look at your beautiful hair, look at the curls, like, just look at the color of your skin. We live in a society where, we have views that defines one color to be more aesthetically pleasing than another. So teaching our girls to embrace and love ourselves, it comes from within to really, kind of show that. And it resonates in different parts of our lives, honestly. So yeah, those are the kind of conversations we need to have.
Definitely. Tamara, back to you. When you're trying to do the project or whatever you're working on, you have to convince also the other side of the population, half of the population. So what is the communication? What is it, the influences there in order to change or to accomplish what you want to do? What do you think is the languages there? What is it that can be done to also include the men in this? Because it has to be done as a partnership.
This was a big barrier for us when we started because it was not going to work until it was proof of concept for us. Because of we had debate class, so much of it was girls using their voices, with education being the end all be all, like that tied everything together. But one thing that we really make sure we do is we work alongside the community. We don't work over them. We have a staff of 18. I never, as a Westerner, I'm never the one, giving the presentations. I'll sit in on them. I will join them. I definitely speak with the community when I'm there, but the message comes from our team, and our team is 80% women. But with this, in the beginning, our first class of 25 girls, there was a lot of pushback from the men, the male caregivers. Sometimes it was an older brother, an uncle, a grandfather. And we made it very clear, like, our success looks different to everybody. We're not telling everyone to be successful, you have to go to college or you can't get married. It's success to us is if our graduates know their voice matters and it's their choice to use it and they have safe options. And so with the men, we really worked with them knowing what girls were like, what their home makeup was, because we had men who were very supportive of our program, and they wanted the girl to succeed and go as far as possible, because this man, he was amazing. He was actually bringing some of this curriculum to his boys, and the student, his daughter, was doing better than the boys in our program. So she was helping them with their math. And throughout the history of their family, that would never happen. Girls would not teach boys math. And so he was a great inspiration. And from that, it's like, okay, would you speak to another dad? Would you, it's just communication. And we've also had a challenge where we had a young girl who was born into a difficult situation, and she received a really great opportunity to come to the US. It was never going to happen. So, he did not believe in education, and we have to, we have to respect that. But we can bring him to the training center. He's welcome to come to any community conversation that we have. And what really pivoted for us is when we had our first graduation with the first group of 25 girls. Now we have 100 girls in each class, and girls were going to college. And that's when it was positive peer pressure. And it was like, oh, well, I want my daughter going to college, or I want my niece going to college. And so then we started getting the support of the men. And I think they also saw that we're not anti-men and we're not anti-boys. The boys must be, like you said earlier, they must be involved. It doesn't matter how much a girl knows she needs to be empowered. If the boys don't know to empower her and how to treat her, then it's not going to happen. So, in a family, obviously the older male has the biggest voice, and it's important that we respect that and we work with that, and we want his voice. And I think you have to hear everybody.
Thank you. Rebecca, similar question. I mean, you mentioned it earlier by saying when do my kabar batagar bilashalina. A little bit to expand a little bit on that. So language, partnership, how do you see it? I mean, especially for you, like when you're building the school, you have to partner with so many people. It's not just the school that you're building is not just for girls, but for boys and girls. But in general, enrolling the girls might be a challenge because maybe the parents might not allow, saying that girls don't need to be educated because all she has to do is get married and take care of the family. So what do you think that role looks like, creating the partnership, and like Tamara saying that making sure that the other side also understand to create a whole society, because we have to do both sides?
Yeah, it's a great question. So starting sort of with my experience raising my partly Ethiopian American girls here, I think it's a question for men, but it's also still a question for women, because we have absorbed so many messages about what a young girl should be. So I think that we need to remind ourselves always. So I think it's important what you model in the home. I think you just model inequality in a relationship. You model all kinds of behaviors. And I think probably the best thing that we can do for young girls is pay attention to them as individuals. I think a great question to ask a girl is, what do you think? What would you like to do? And keep reinforcing for them that they can be the driver of a situation in the beginning. I think we need to be careful what we compliment them for. We have to be careful. I hear it about complimenting on the curls, yet I try to compliment my girls on their effort, what they choose to do, not outcomes or not what they look, but really to focus there. And I think it's great to just let them make a mess. My 10-year-old will destroy my kitchen because she's always exploring things, and I just have to say, what are you learning? Tell me more. When I feel like saying, what are you doing? So I think it's really great to let them make a mess, get messy, touch things, break things, and not think, just to follow their lead. So I think those are the things that I've learned about how I've raised my kids. And then your boys will see that as well. So if you're attentive to them as individuals and let them take the lead, what do you think? What do you want to do? It's a question that girls don't get asked nearly enough. Now, if we're talking about the context of Ethiopia, for our school, as I said, it's co-ed. Turns out this first year, we actually, we're intentionally set up to be 50-50. I just think we have to be very intentional about what we do to pull in both boys and girls and to pull in families. So it's not an accident that our head of school is female and our deputy head is male. That was a choice. Our faculty is similarly both diverse in every way. Our classes will be 50-50, although, as I said, this first year we have more girls than boys. We are setting up structures where clubs will be co-led. Everything will be co. So we just won't leave it to accident, because these are still kids. So we have to give them opportunities to learn how to lead, both for the girls to do it and also for the boys to lead in conjunction with the girl, to do it together. And so we have the luxury of creating a community from the beginning. So we will tell families what our expectations are. We will talk to them and expect them to support it and really talk to them. If you're sending us your girl, if you're sending us your son for this incredible opportunity, this is the way it's going to be, because we're building leaders for the future and we're creating a world. So I think we have a little bit of room and it's a residential community as well. So we have time really to reinforce all these messages at home, in class, after school. But again, going back to, it just doesn't happen by accident. It's not something that's going to happen on its own. If we don't all pay attention to all the little places where we can intervene, change the messaging, give the support, be careful about what we say and how we talk to our girls and our boys, it requires all of our efforts at all places.
Thank you. Munita, I know you mentioned it earlier, the partnership that you have with your husband and how it helps. And then kids are going to watch that. They're going to see how you manage, how you co-parent, and how you talk to each other. That's going to be a big part of it. So if you can just a little bit expand on that, and then we're going to go to your video to show it. So I know you already said it, but just a little bit more that partnership, what kids are observing, what it means.
Sure. I think definitely the keyword intentional, I would have to echo with Rebecca, because I think in our household, there was this one day, and I didn't stage it. It just happened by coincidence that I was helping my son with his math club and my husband was cooking us dinner. And I looked up and I was like, this is fantastic. And then I just kept going. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't say like, look at me, I'm the math whiz and he's the chef. I didn't do anything like, but I did smile at the fact that was just the natural order. So it's kind of really saying, I remember when my son, I have the same profile. I have a son, and then I have 2 younger daughters. And I remember when my son was born, the first question that I said was, who is this person? That was the way that I dealt with my children. Every time a child was born, I said, who are you now? Because I don't know my children. I don't want to assume anything about my children. I don't know their skill sets. I don't know their passions. I don't know what their emotional balance is going to be. I have a very sensitive boy. All right, let's do it. Let's take care of the sensitive boy. I have a very, how do I say it? She's my manager. I have a manager daughter, and then I have an artist daughter. So at each child, in my domestic perspective, what it's been is that, you know, I kind of have followed, if any of you have read The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, there's a section, it's an excellent book that I recommend anybody who's out there listening, read it. It's in probably 1,000 languages, if there are 1,000 languages in the world, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And he has a section in there about our children. And it talks about how, you know, our children are not our children. They're like the sons of daughter of time. And we're there to kind of guide them, but we cannot transfer our thoughts. We cannot transfer our ideas. We cannot make them like us, and because they're themselves. So the fundamental thing is to say, all right, child, who are you and what do you want to be? And how can I support whatever it is that you want to be? Like my daughters, for instance, one of my daughters loves to make me food. I'm not going to resist it because I love a child making me my lunches. I'm all right with that. But then my son doesn't know how to run the dishwasher. And I'm like, I'm not okay with that. So you're going to run a dishwasher. So it's really about diversifying their tasks at home and making it random. Like, you know, you're going to do the yard today, and now today you're going to do something else. Everybody can do anything. It's really perfectly fine to do whatever the task is, because it's tasks. They're just tasks. There's no gendered task. They're just tasks. So kind of really clarifying it in that way would be important. With anything that has to do with gender equity and the struggle for gender equity, it's always something that I always struggle with, though, because my young feminist sisters are very firecrackery. And so sometimes what ends up happening is that when we also push really hard, it's like physics. I also believe in physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So it has to kind of be about normalizing the language. It's not like, well, you know, we're the best and you're the worst. It's not competitive. You know what I mean? We're not here to compete with each other as genders. We're not here to show who's better at this or better at that. It's really a matter of saying all of us have place, all of us have purpose, all of us have skill. They're different things, and they can all coalesce and co-work, and synergy and all of that is possible. So with the way that, like, you know, when we talk about feminism or gender equity and men, it always kind of feels like it's a threat. But the language around that is what needs to shift, is that there's nobody that's here gunning for your position or gunning for your rights and for your roles as a father. Be a father. You have to work out what that means to you. I had to figure out how I was as a mother when I became a mother. I didn't have like, I'm going to be this mother kind of rigidity, but really being flexible and trying to figure out a way that works, being a little bit pragmatic, because I think sometimes what ends up happening is that the feminists are really tough, as they should be, because there's a lot of things that we need to be tough about. But sometimes that toughness then gets resistance that's tougher than it would have been had the conversation been a little bit more, all right, let's work this thing out. There are certain things that are unfair. Let's make it fair. So kind of bringing it to that space where we're like, what you would like to have happen is what I would like to have happen. What you think are your rights are what I think are my rights. So how do we make that happen? It's not against you. It's not against society as a whole and our cultural norms as a whole. It's really about making things more just, about justice and equity and fairness, without it being, again, about a competitive, it's this way or that way. It will work itself out. Generation through generation, society works itself out. Culture is dynamic. Religion is dynamic. A lot of things are dynamic. Everything transforms. So it's really a matter of pushing hard, but then also figuring a way to communicate with our brothers on the other side about what it means to be fair, what it means to sometimes check your brothers and friends when they're acting manly in your toxic masculine space, and you have to interject, how to be brave, because it takes a lot of courage for boys to be brave and to be feminists in a space where toxic masculinity is normal. So I think it would be about really understanding, what does toxic masculinity look like, and how do I refrain from those things that you've been taught, whether you like it or not, from the environment that is around you, and what does subservient femininity mean, and how do I resist that because it's been around everything around you, and figuring that balance. Both of us have to keep working towards that balance. I named my child Mizan, so I'm really very much focused on balance and balancing things out. But I think it has to be intentional. It has to be consistent. It does not have to be confrontational. It has to be persistent, though. So it's really a matter of figuring that out. And then again, I'm lucky. My husband's very, every once in a while be like, don't be that way. Boys don't do that. And I'll be like, say it again, brother. I'm here. I'm listening to you. So I'm always checking him. So it's fine that my brother hears my man husband being like, men are like this. And then it's fine that I say, well, not necessarily. And then he can work it out because, the world is also the world. He has to exist in that context that is messy. It's messy, but it's really about being consistent, persistent, and evolving. We have to evolve too, because we're going to see the biases that we didn't think we had come out in our language, and you're going to catch yourself and say, oh man, that wasn't cool. And then you're going to have to say, my bad, let me check myself. I apologize. I said this. And apologize to our children is important. Apologize to our children when we're not doing the right thing, and check ourselves and correct ourselves.
Thank you. We're going to talk about feminism next. So you opened it up really good. So I like that. Before I'm going to show Yenya video. But before I do that, let me read one comment that Rahel put in just to summarize what we will be talking about. Kids learn by example more than words. We also have to examine our roles in the household. If mom is the only one doing household chores and dad are the only decision makers, then we are modeling gender roles that are more powerful than worse. I agree with her. That's why we did. It's has to be a balance. Our girls, boys have to see that balance check in the house so that they know how to treat their sisters and they know how to treat their future wives when it comes to it. We're going to talk about feminism, sometimes why it's negative, why sometimes it may look like confrontational, like Munit said. What is the way? What is the balance on how to be able to understand so that we don't go from one extreme to the next? But before we do that, let's take a little break. Stay tuned. We're going to show you one video, and then Munit will tell us a little bit about it. So let's go. Stay tuned. And
አቤት አቤት በሉን አቤት ስሙን አቤት አቤት እንታለን በሉን አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት አቤት በሉኝ አቤት ስሙኝ አቤት አቤት እንታለን በሉኝ አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት አቤት በሉን አቤት ስሙን አቤት አቤት እንታለን አቤት እኛ ስለኛ አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት እዚህ ቤት የልጅ እንደናት ሆነ የሚስት ሆና እንደዋዛ ስትታይ ዝም ይባላል ወይ? ሴት ሶስት ነፍስ ይዛ በፍቅር በመተጋገዝ ተሳስበን ሰተን በጋራ አንድ ሆነን በደስታ እንኖር እንዳለን እንዳንለያይ አደራ እንዳንለያይ አደራ እንውጣ እንቃብልን እናሳይ ይላለን ያሳይ ችሎታ ብቃትበን ይደነቃለን እንሰብሰብ ተዋደን እንኖር ስም በጋራ ሰዎች እንዳንለያይ በሉ አደራ እንዳንለያይ እንዳንለያይ አደራ እንዳንለያይ እንዳንለያይ አደራ አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት እዚህ ቤት አቤት እዚህ ቤት ያክብረኝ ላክብረው መናናቁም ቢቀር መቼም የትም ቢሆን ያሸንፋል ነገር
ለምን ትዘን ሆናይ ጎኔ እኔ በዚህ ጃለም አታሰው ከጎና አቋማቷት ላያት አልፈልግም ገብቷት ብሷት እንጌቻልኩኔ እሷን ልደግፋት እንዳላየ ሆንኩኝ ዝጋለባት ግን አሁን ይብቃኝ ልቁም ጎና ዓለም ያለ ሰሙራት ሆንምና ለምን ልጣት ለምን ትዝን ሆናይ ጎኔ እኔ በዚህ ጃለም
ተነስተናል ቆርጠናል ይኸው መጥተናል ይበቃናል ከድሮ ተነስተናል ዘንድሮ ተነስተናል ድሮ ተንቀናል ባሳለፍነው ሰዎች ከፍቶናል ተነስተናል ዛሬ ኮርተናል ፍቅር ጥበብ ተስፋን ይዘናል ተደፍረናል ድሮ ተንቀናል ባሳለፍነው ሰዎች ከፍቶናል ተነስተናል ዛሬ ኮርተናል ፍቅር ጥበብ ተስፋን ይዘናል
I love the song. So we have the honor of having Munitan here. And I even love not only about the song and the words, but the way intentionally, I think like the way you dressed the five ladies differently with their haircut is different. It's like, it's not just one thing that you always picture that a woman should be look like. So represented in different cultures. One is wearing shash, one is just definitely made hair, all different things. So if you can tell us a little bit before we talk about feminism.
Sure. This is the project that I mentioned earlier. This is Yenya. And like I said, it was a project specifically geared around shifting the perception of girls in the country and using media as a tool for positive social change around that perception. And so what we actually had was based on research. A lot of this is based on a lot of research. It was the Nike Foundation with in Ethiopia, DFID, which is the British US aid. And then there were a lot of local theater folks, songwriter folks, producers, directors, and all of that creative team that was locally based, and the research also locally based. So the idea is that, you see 5 girls. I don't know if you noticed, but there were 5 girls. And the idea is that, there are many different things that girls deal with. With one of the characters, we had a character that had experienced early childhood marriage, had ran away from her husband, and was currently now living as a homeless girl on the streets. So the girl with the red that had that kind of punky hairstyle, her character's name was Mimi, and she was carrying the burden of early childhood, escaped that situation because she didn't want to be in that context, and then she ended up homeless, which is a reality that we see. One of the girls who was the first character that you see, her name in the story was Lemlem, and what she ended up having to do was be the mother for her children. So the burden that she had to deal with was a lot of the domestic chores were on her. Her mother was sick, so she had to be the one taking care of her kids, which meant that she would always be constantly skipping on school. She couldn't be present as much as she would. She did her work after school, after she'd taken care of the kids and the farm, etc. The girl with the pink that was like flowy hair, that was Melat, and she had more the issue of having big vision, but then being limited and not being able to achieve that vision because of gendered issues, because of all kinds of other domestic, also violence issue in her household. Then we have 2 other characters, and one character was dealing with isolation. A lot of girls are isolated. They go to school, they go home. They go to school, they go home. Boys get to play out in the wilderness and they do whatever they do, but with girls, it was a very domestic school-based thing. So the idea that a girl should have at least 5 friends that she has around her to surround her, to support her, so that she can alleviate the isolation that also a lot of girls deal with. And then the final character was Emuye, and what she experienced was a lot of violence in her home as well, domestic violence, and her mother having to endure that domestic violence, and then eventually she gets sick, she dies, and then having to be alone now, having to deal with the consequence of that. So we had 5 characters that had 5 different things that were different like pillars of burdens that the girls in society deal with. And my role again was with working on what are we singing about? What like so with this with this song, it's been a while since I heard it, so I'm all emotional now. But I literally like wrote the script of the song. Like she will come in and say this, and then she will come and say that, and then after that, we're going to have a boy come in and say, "I'm going to be by your side." Because again, the question is, it can't just be us talking to ourselves. Because yes, we still have to do that because there's a lot of women that are not on board with what does equality look like and what does equity mean, because of all the centuries of learning that we've learned within our societies, our religions, our cultures, and all of those things. But it can't also just be just us talking to ourselves. It has to include men. It has to include men as role models. It has to include men talking to other men. It has to include men saying to women, I will take your message and multiply it forward. Because gender then, if it's just about women talking about we want equality, becomes kind of like a sideline thing that gets tacked on to an issue. Like there's economic development, and then you kind of tack on gender, when really we have to say economic development, and a big part of it within it is gender. Education, and then we say, but what about the question of girls in education at the side? It can't be that gender is tacked on the side and it's the women's issue. It's really about gender as something that is overarching over everything, and it has to be central in the way that we see our development, because you cannot develop half the world and expect economic development to be sustainable, to be rapid, to be really deep and rooted in the community and all of that. So that's why there's a character that comes in as a boy and says, how can I watch her suffer? How can I watch her lose? How can I watch her when she is literally like my other half, when she is with me? I cannot be this person that's a bystander watching her suffering. I have to stand with her. So that was all intentional, intentionality being again what it is.
I like
And
it.
that was one of the many, many songs that we did. And again, this is a project that started in 2011 and is still going on. So it went from radio to drama, lots of songs, lots of stories, etc., etc. So that was the context for that.
Thank you. We'll have a whole show just on that. So I love that because it does come in. So let's talk about, and we touched earlier before we went to the song, about feminism. Sometimes while we're trying to move in the society, is there some message that I get or others that would be like the differences sometimes between womanism and feminism? I mean, like they say, like, I mean, womanism is family oriented and focuses on race, class, and gender maybe. And then sometimes feminism is looked at as just female oriented and strictly only focuses on gender. While we're trying to accomplish this, while we're trying to educate girls, is it possible sometimes that we think the feminism part can, how do we call it? Because sometimes even the boys, it's because that's the education that they learned. It's not they want to be a certain way, but it's just that's all they know because of culture of where they are. So Jerry, because that's the age that you guys have, and then is there a reason sometimes like feminism by itself can scare men, creating call it partnership to come in? Or is there even, I mean, I see even a division between women. I mean, just even in the female part, I'm not a feminist, I am this type of thing. Even that creates another fight in there when we're trying to advance that can pull us back. So this is open for all of you. If you try to keep the answers for 2 minutes or under, and then let's have this discussion touched up a little bit. Does feminism help, or does it restrict the growth in whatever that you're all trying to accomplish and trying to say all girls need to be educated and have an equal world? What do you see feminism affecting it or helping it? What do you think, Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we get stuck with the word, like, or identifying as a feminist, or just, you know, what does it mean? Or even like for me, for years, I strayed away from defining myself as a feminist, just because in the media or in society, it's kind of deemed as like a negative thing, or it has a certain image of a middle class, you know, white woman, and that's what feminist, you know, movement means, when in reality, that's not. And I think for the guys, just from my experience and what the conversation that I've had amongst my friends, is that even though they believe in the ideology of feminism and gender equality, they don't want to be labeled as that, because it might have, you know, a certain perception of them, or it might view them as something else. And so that fear affects them from making the change that they want to see in society. When I actually sit down and have the conversations with them, a lot of the views that we have is very similar, but yet they will never identify as a feminist. They will never call themselves that, or even publicly, come out to address it. And I think that's an issue that we need to address amongst like the younger generation, especially just understanding that it's not just about the word. The word is just a word, right? But the meaning behind it, what does it mean? Like, why would anyone not want gender equality? Why would you not want everybody to have a fair level field to kind of, do everything that they want? So as a society and in our generation, we just get stuck on the name, and that's creating a lot of friction and a lot of issues, when in reality we should be focused on the ideology and the meaning behind it.
Thank you. Tamara, same thing. Like, do you think the feminism movement does help in the movement to trying to educate all girls, or does it have sometimes, because of the words that get used, it just feels like the men are being threatened by it, or does it stop it? So what is your thinking and feeling about that?
I agree a lot with what Jerry said, and that we don't use the word. I think it could scare people for the wrong reasons, and then you can't get to where you're going. Equality is where we go. Equality is a part of all of our curriculum. We have martial arts, and I think just by a girl advancing belt levels in martial arts, that brings a sense of self-esteem. And it goes back to knowing her voice matters, and she brings this into her home, into her school, and it's kind of an organic path that we focus on intentionally. We don't intentionally focus on the word feminism. And then as far as, we don't want to be blind to that. It's global, and the boys need to know, the girls need to know, they both have to be involved. What we do is we celebrate UN recognized days. And so International Women's Day, March 8th, and International Day of the Girl, October 12th, those are two of our key days. And then we have Africa Code Week that brings tech into it. And again, it's the message. It's not in really in your face message that girls should be in tech. It's like, well, why not? We're just doing it. And from that, I think that's how we get the message across. And our girls know they matter. The men and boys in their lives know through more of an organic approach.
Okay, thank you. Some things, if you want to add anything to it, Rebecca, with everything that we're trying to advance, like I said, we need it, but certain kind of movement, does it stop it? Does it help? What do you think the role of feminism is in all this movement?
So I generally agree with what was just said. Words do matter. It's hard for me to understand why we aren't all feminists, the way I understand the term. But on the other hand, I'm more focused on outcomes. So pragmatically, you could focus on the work itself. But at the same time, words do matter, and certain voices, not everybody's experience is the same. In some ways, I see it as analogous to the conversations that we're having now around Black Lives Matter and centering of Black voices in that conversation. And there is a bit of pushback. You get like, well, all lives matter. But yes, all lives do matter. But right now, the fire is over here. So we're paying attention to this fire. So I'm a little bit, I think we have to do both. We both have to find the language that gets us where we want to get most expeditiously, without in any way pretending that people are bringing the same set of experiences to a situation, because they're not. They're not. Girls are not experiencing the same thing the boys are experiencing. So we have to honor that as well. So I think, once again, we have to walk, chew gum, do it all at the same time in service of outcomes that we all support.
Thank you. I know you've touched up on it. I don't know if you want to add a little bit in short on that.
Yeah, I mean, in short, what I would say is that I think all of us are necessary. Like, I feel like my young firecracker sisters that are out there going, I'm a feminist, and why aren't you a feminist, and pushing, are necessary. But then there's also going to be another generation that's going to be a little bit, maybe they've gone through that, and then now they're at a level going, what is the way that we can move forward that pulls more people into the center? Sometimes, you don't want to be too centrist, because sometimes you compromise too much for that. But at the same time, it takes all kinds, is the thing that I would say. It does take all kinds. There is now a brand of African feminism that really is coming up strong, that is trying to redefine itself in the context of Africa. And it's utilizing different words, and it's playing around with vocabulary, because we don't want words to be the thing. We don't want to be like stuck on semantics and all of that. But I think for me, what has, again, going back to my mother, human rights. you know, you have like sustainable development goals, we have human rights goals, we have all of those kinds of big giant goals that had we just gotten them done, it would have been the most feminist thing to have done, right? So the doing of it and the goals that are things that we have all agreed upon as nations, we've all, you know, we're all signatories of those kinds of things, and using that as the core pillar will get you there as well. I think definitely the academics should theorize, the feminists should feminize, the boys should be like, I'm a feminist too, and all of those things will help. But when you really think about, at the end of the day, the goal is, you know, it is written in human rights language, it's written in sustainable development goals language, it's written in all of that. So if you did do the work, if you got equal opportunity for girls to be able to stay in school, to be able to have the opportunities, to have access to markets, to have access to information, we have feminized and feministed the world if we did the work. So I think the language, the debates, they, you know, it is a matter of, at the end of the day, there's ego, there's pride, there's all of those things that come in the way of just being like, well, what do you really mean? Because I think the thing to say is really, what do you really mean? And you find that what we are saying as feminism is equality. Equality is not something like, I don't know that there are many men that really want to say, no, I don't want you to be equal to me. I really want you to be under my feet. Like, I don't think that's a lot of men that say that, but by the things that happen in the world, that is the thing that happens in the world. So I think we do need all kinds, we do need all movements, but the focus should be around ensuring that human rights are achieved for all. So that's how I kind of think of it. And so my language, I went to the most feminist spaces and, you know, like all the, but I don't really, my mother never said the word feminist. I don't really use the word feminist too much. I just live my life that way, you know, like, so it's between those two.
I agree with you. Equality, that's what we're trying to achieve. And then words do mean, they do have, but at the same time, when we're trying to work on certain things, just trying to balance it out and then trying to accomplish what we need to do. So we have more to talk about, especially when it comes to sex trafficking, why girls end up going into the, what sometimes we call it sex work, and what is it, the challenges in the lives that you're trying to build, the schools that you're trying to build that you see. But and then one question I'm gonna ask all of you is a personal story that touched you, each of you. Before we do that, I want to go quickly break on to our sponsor, one of the video.
መረጃዎችን ማግኘት ይፈልጋሉ? እንግዲያውስ thehabesha.web.com አለን። thehabesha.web.com ለሁሉም ነገር ምቹ የሆነ ዌብሳይት ነው። የፈለጉትን ኢንፎርሜሽን የሚያገኙበትና በቀላሉ የሚጠቀሙበት ዌብሳይት ነው። ስራ ለሚቀጥሩ ካምፓኒዎችና መቀጠር ለሚፈልጉ ግለሰቦች thehabesha ዌብሳይት ሁሉንም ነገር ቀላል አድርጎላችኋል።
በተለያየ ስቴትስ የተለያየ ቢዝነስ ያላችሁም ቢዝነሳችሁን thehabesha ዌብ ላይ በማስገባት ተጨማሪ ደንበኛ ማግኘት ትችላላችሁ።
ሬንት ወይም ሩምሜት በሚፈልጉበት ጊዜና ሰዓት ማግኘት የህልም እንጀራ ነበረ። ለሱም መፍትሄው thehabesha.web.com ሆኗል። ለኢቨንት አዘጋጆችና ፕሮሞተሮች ቀላል ዘዴ በhabesha ዌብሳይት ተገኝቶላችኋል። ትኬቶቻችሁን በቀላሉ thehabesha ዌብሳይት ላይ መሸጥ ትችላላችሁ። እቃ መሸጥና መለወጥ ለምትፈልጉ ሰዎች ሁሉንም ነገር መሸጥ፣ መለወጥ፣ መግዛት ትችላላችሁ። thehabesha.web.com።
Thank you. The Habesha Web is a website that all Habesha's businesses can put their businesses out there. And then if you go in there and put in the Yoftahe show, you will also be able to advertise your businesses. I mean, we have this tendency of, we say in Amharic, Abro Mavlatin G, Abro Mesratin Anakim. And this is an area that where we can all work together to promote each other's businesses. So the Habesha Web is a great place to advertise all your businesses. Please make sure to do that and mention the Yoftahe show that you heard it from. So story has a lot for all of us that touched us, that moved us, why I want to do this, I want to wake up. And then without mentioning the names, if there is one story, if each of you can pick up, or it could be your personal or whatever that you have gone through, in whatever project that you are doing, you're working in, that he says, I am meant to do this. This is my calling because I saw this life being changed. Jerry, I don't know if you want to skip this or if you want to say something on this, like what you have seen in your area, that if this person needs this kind of help or whatever, that the story that touched you, and then each of you, I'll ask you specifically on the project that you are working on, what is the story that moved you and that made you do what you're doing? So, Jerry, if you want to say anything, not sure.
Yeah. So for me, I don't necessarily have a specific like a story, but what I remember is I've always wanted to help people. So I studied communication studies, and I've always wanted to go into like the speaking, kind of nonprofit work. And I remember when I was 16, I went back home, and I just wanted to do something, right? When I went back, I always wanted to come back to like do something for my community, because I saw where, the opportunities that I had here, the privileges, and like some of the people that I grew up with, they didn't end up the same way or where I was. They didn't have the opportunities that I did. And so when I went back, I just gathered up some money, and we literally just made like, injera in a plastic bag, wrapped it up, and just took it to our near like church. And they have like a lot of homeless people out there. And I remember we had maybe 100 bags. We gave it all out, and there was still so many people that didn't have enough. And I remember like I drove by a Bajaj, and I was just, my heart was broken just to see like I didn't have enough for everyone. And for me at 16, that was a shifting moment for me. I knew that I wanted to create something where I can actually help people and create a system where they can learn to get back into society, not just, provide the food, because that's just, temporary fixes, but actually a program where they can learn the actual resources in order to, kind of teach them for 6 months or however to build their lives and kind of learn how to manage money, learn how to grab these skills that they can kind of put into the world. So that moment in my life really impacts kind of a lot of the decisions I make and how I move, which has now, led into more of like focusing on just women empowerment in general. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. Tamara, let me come to you. You're doing an amazing work. So if you can touch up, I know you did it at the beginning, just touch up a little bit on what made you, like if you pick one story that touched your heart and you're saying, I'm glad I'm doing this. This is why this project is working, or that's why I need to keep doing it. So if you can just share a little bit, something that is close to your heart.
Thank you. The story that I shared when we first opened, that planted the seed with the young girl who I befriended who was trafficked, that's what planted the seed for me and really touched me and kind of paved the way for the type of platform we wanted. We wanted Teach a Woman to Fish. We did not want to give handouts. We wanted the girls to know that when they graduated from the program, it was them doing it, not us doing it, and that they had safe options. And from something so, at its core of a young girl being trafficked, a follow-up, which was just like, seeing this in the works was, I had returned to, I usually go once or twice a year. When I go once, I'm usually there for about a month. With COVID, unfortunately, that's not happening, but I do know the girls personally. And so I showed up at the training center, and this group of girls, they ran up to me at the gate, and they knew I was coming, and I never rest. I go straight from the plane, and I'm jet lagged, and it was very exciting. And their adrenaline keeps my adrenaline going. And so they're like, did she tell you? Did she tell you? And I didn't know what they were talking about. And it was one of their classmates who had used her voice in school. And she was in a situation, in a pay for grades situation. And again, it usually happens with the girls. It's sexual abuse from the teachers if they want to pass the grade. And so she was being harassed, and she didn't speak up. Her friends at Studio Samuel, they consider each other sisters, they all started talking. They said, if you don't speak up, we're going to the director of Studio Samuel. And she didn't. So they brought her to the director, and it's run by a man. He brought in our female social workers, and they shared this story. And he went to the school, and under the condition that she would come with him, and she did. And she had the support of her fellow students and our team, obviously. It went to the principal, it went to the local police officers station, and there was not allowed to be any backlash from the teacher. It went pretty far, and she was so empowered, and you could see that on her face because she did use her voice. And I think she realized the time that had passed when she didn't use her voice, she wouldn't have gone through that. if she had the strength to stand up. And so her example really showed for the other girls. And, she became part of our mentorship program, and she's mentoring another girl. And it's just the empowerment feeds off of each other. And I think as soon as a girl uses her voice once and it stops something like this is her personal space. This is her. And she made it stop on her own. It wasn't her parents. It wasn't, she didn't have that network. But so that touches me. And we have so many stories like that. But, seeing a girl do it on her own and she knows she did it, that's why we do what we do. Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing. Rebecca, back to you. It's like same thing. What touched you? I know you mentioned it earlier type of thing, but what wakes you up in the morning, said, this is my calling, this is what I need to do? So if you have a story in there that you can share.
That's a great story, Tamara. Well, we're still building, right? So my stories really have to do with understanding just how much this school is wanted in Ethiopia and how much people have gone to sort of help. I mean, what I was referring to earlier, sort of being an immigrant, always thinking that problems were my own to solve. So going back to Ethiopia and starting the school, which will commence next month, operations, first, I've had the present of somehow, I've lived outside of there for over 30 years, but somehow being welcomed home in a way that I hadn't expected. So that's a sort of small personal present that I have received. And then all the help. So yesterday was International Volunteers Day. So I just put up a post about our lawyers. We have great lawyers, and I went and found them because Ethiopia is a very difficult place to do work. And I was like, find me somebody who really knows what they're doing. And I met these great lawyers, Musfin Tafas and Associates, pro bono. Didn't ask them to do it, but they just said, oh, we see what you're doing. This is what we're going to contribute. And they have been incredible. So that's one thing that is really it's just so moving to have that help, which is real help, and to feel that we're not doing it alone. And there have been countless people who have really stepped in ways big and small to do that, including the founding faculty whom Tamara knows, who are taking pay cuts and really just have bought into the mission to sort of build this school for Ethiopia. So that's been really sort of touching for me to sort of anticipate what's to come. I hope if I'm on the show next time, I'll have stories about students sort of taking it off in their own directions. But up until now, it's really been stories about collaborative building and allowing me to feel connected to home and also to grow really in ways that working with talented peers to sort of learn and lean into new areas, to take risks. One of the things that we were talking about modeling earlier, I didn't say, but I think it's very important that we show our girls risk-taking and failing and getting back up again. Just fine. That's how you get somewhere. So I think that's a very important piece. So I feel like I've been able to do that in ways that I didn't allow myself to do earlier because I didn't have a safety net and I was so nervous about taking care of myself. So for me, this has been an opportunity to do something which I think will be incredible for Ethiopia, but also super satisfying on a personal level with the help of so many individuals that I've met along the way. So I feel very lucky to be in this position.
Thank you. As I promised, still have it on my calendar. The first graduates, I'll be there on graduation day at the school. So
you're
that's definitely. Munit, what touches you? Is there a story in there that you want to share with us that I don't?
Yeah, I mean, because I think for me, the story that keeps me going kind of is the experience that my mother had growing up, in terms of what she had to overcome, how she managed to overcome, the presence of mind, the strength of character, and the fact that, with her ability to push through, she was able to be such a gift and such a blessing to women around the world, to women in Ethiopia, to girls in Ethiopia. Lucky because I'm lucky enough to be in around media, around music, creation, culture, arts. And because the project that I worked on for the longest time with Yenya and also with Women for Women International, there were thousands of stories, right? There's thousands and thousands of stories coming in from Women for Women International. Literally, they would write letters of thank you. This is what I have done with the resources. This is what I've been able to manage. This is how I've been able to take care of my children. And you see how, you save one life, you save the world feeling is really true. Like, I mean, I'm insignificant. I am one life. Everybody's insignificant, but we're also so significant, right? So that feeling has been something that is always with me. Like my mother's life is my mother's, but then it has had ripple effects in terms of health and well-being and my children's well-being. It's a generational thing that I have inherited from her. With Yenya, one of the cutest things that happened once was, with these characters, they have these costumes and they go around and touring and performing, and thousands of people would come to their shows. And at one location, they all came dressed up like the girls. They all came dressed up exactly like those characters. And they were just so thrilled to see these girls and, seeing the impact and the way that they were like really embracing these these characters, these stories, and then sharing how much it meant for them and how less lonely they felt. I think a lot of girls feel lonely, and a lot of girls feel isolated, and a lot of girls feel like they're the only ones in the world with all of this burden. We might understand it systematically, but to each life, it's that life that's lived. They only get to experience it that one time. So seeing so many people respond with "me too," and I'm also worried. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to ask my parents to enable me to continue with school. Like all of those kinds of battles, hearing it in mass, it just makes you feel like we have so much to do. And I think now again, I'm so like, it's really nice to be around people doing things around education in schools, because this is the last 2 years that I've really been around educating, and it's been through art and integration and early childhood. And you see when children are young, how they're so open to just create a new world. So that's been something that's been really motivating me. The younger that they are, the more they're ready to create the utopia that we want to have happen. They're not questioning. They're like, okay, sure, she's just like me and I'm just like him, and it's not racist, it's not sexist, and it's not, ethnicist or whatever it is. It's just, she took my toy, I would like it back, or something that, like simple and human, but it's so open. So part of me has really been saying, the earlier I can get my hands on these babies, and we can get our hands on these babies and teach them about human rights and respect and dignity for all and things like that, the better that we will be 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years down the line. So between my mother, between the babies, between all of the feedback that we get, a lot of things motivate me. And I think it's the fact that, again, it shouldn't be because I'm lucky. It should be because that is always available for all. It shouldn't be a question of luck that women get to be their full potentials, make the choices and make the mistakes and figure it out, etc., etc. But yeah.
Ruby, I also want to say to you that our girls are huge fans of Yenya.
Aww.
They are. Yeah.
I'm so glad.
They've written stories. They've taken on each character. It's a fantastic project. Thank you.
That is great to hear. That's by itself. So, we all know, we touched the reason that I wanted to do this is by, the last number that I was looking at the UNICEF, I think, like it says, over 65 million girls are out of school. And then they are being marginalized, simply keeping the girls at home because of cultural or different reasons, legal. Some places they can't even read. They're not allowed to read. So those are the kind of things sometimes we do forget. So all you ladies are working on this and doing something that is going to be able to change. We're coming close to our show. So I want to give each of you a chance, for someone like me, for someone like Jerry, how to get involved in the project that you're doing. So I'm going to give you each, I'm going to start with you, Tamara, and said a little bit, summarize it. I know you already said it. How can we get involved? If people want to find out about what the project that you are doing, where do we find it? Rebecca, we need the same question I'm going to give you. So tell us, summarize a little bit about the project, where you are located, and how people can get involved with what you're doing. You're muted.
Thank you. We are currently located in Citis Kilo, and we have 3 pillars to our program. We reach each stage of a girl and woman's life. 9 to 18 years old is an after-school and weekend program for life skills and employable skills. 18 to 24 is a college. The government certified us as a college without asking. They saw success that the girls were doing this. And when, like I said, we saw the caregivers keeping girls home for work, we started a micro-lending program for the caregivers to keep them working. And it worked. So I will, we're limited on time. I'll jump straight to what we need, if that's okay. For a year-end appeal, like I said, we never give anything. Once a year, we do celebrate Gana, Ethiopian Christmas, usually January 7th. We celebrate the final week of Christmas. And more than ever, excuse me, these gifts are needed. We look for approximately $30 US per family. We have a minimum of 100 girls in the program. And we distribute Ghana gifts to them. It's teff, it's cooking oil. There will likely be some COVID supplies in the package right now. We've had caregivers lose their jobs, as I said, and it's really, really difficult for them. So we're helping them put food on the table. So like I said, once a year we do give gifts, and it's coming up for Ghana, and we're looking for $30 per family. The website is studiosamuel.org. Samuel is spelled like Samuel, Samuel. Thank you for that again. Appreciate it. And thank you all. I've learned a lot today, and I hope to speak with you off-site.
Thank you. We will post your website and everything else on the bottom after the show so that people can get in touch more and then learn more about the project. Rebecca, back to you. Same thing about the school. Where do we find you? How can people contact you? And just a little bit of a summary where you stand. I know you said you're starting the opening up shortly. So where can people find and how can get involved?
Thank you. The school is located in Debre Birhan, which is about under 2 hours away from the capital. It's a boarding school, so recruiting students from across the country. We didn't get as far as we wanted this year. At full enrollment, we'll have 100 kids per grade, so 400 students total. This first year, as I said, we have 38 students. The model is to admit kids based on national exams and our own exams, and the hope is to admit them whether or not, independent of their financial circumstances. So we've raised enough to build our beautiful campus. It's on 8 hectares, and really the fundraising now is for scholarship funds, so we can continue to accept talented kids no matter where they come from what they themselves can afford to pay. So our website is ethiopiaed.org, and the school is in Debre Birhan. And again, this first year, because the world was upside down, all 38 students are attending on scholarship. We'll just charge them some nominal amount for uniforms and fees, but the plan is to sustain them through the 4 years and then to revert to the mixed model. So our fundraising is really for scholarships.
Thank you. We also put the Alimanes Academy website so people learn more about it. So thank you again for everything that you're doing. Munit, what are you working on? Is there anything that you're asking people to get involved with?
Well, I would, because of
sorry about this.
Go ahead.
I should also say, just because it's a new school and people don't know yet about us, even just spreading the word. I'm sorry, Munit, I forgot to say. No. Letting people know that this great school is coming up. It's our first year, so we're just not on everybody's radar screen. We will be soon, but just sharing that word and mentioning to particularly families who have 8th graders who might want to apply next year would be terrific as well. Sorry, Munit.
No, you're good. I want to know more about it because I didn't know about it myself until this opportunity came. So the more we know, the more we do. And it actually feeds right into what I was going to say, which is because of my work around arts, culture, media, and amplifying other people's work has been one of the funner things of my life. I do a lot of emceeing, I do a lot of organizing, and there are so many fantastic organizations, and it's almost making me feel like I wish there was an umbrella thing that shows you all the things. So maybe that'll be the next project that I'll work on, is all the women working on the women things and all the men working on gender equity and whatever it might be. But even in terms of directly, like there's a couple of things that just popped up recently. One of them is this thing called Kalela Guides, which is a group of women a group of individuals, men and women, that worked on a guide about preventing sexual abuse of children, for example. And that's something that I helped with some of the editorial things, but also just more sharing and amplifying it. Kalela Guides at kalela.org. There's an organization called Setawit, which is based out of Ethiopia. And they're doing a lot of things around, again, creating phone lines that you can call in case of any kind of domestic abuse issues and other kinds of legal needs, and really, again, amplifying Ethiopian feminism. There's the Yellow Movement, which is a bunch of young law students at Addis Ababa University that came together and that are doing different things around, again, empowering girls, ensuring their safety within schools, and supporting girls that need financial support so that they can stay in school. In Texas, there's Abba Women's Foundation that's been supporting women in Ethiopia, trying to create, again, a very sustainable model around economic empowerment and creating businesses and micro enterprises. There are so many organizations. So I think a part of me is kind of, I feel like I accumulate a lot of this information because I MC, I support, I fundraise with them, and I share and do whatever I can. I'm the do whatever I can yes person, and so I'm always involved with many different things. But like within Ethiopia, from young and energetic, again, for women, for children, for girls kind of organizations. Yenya is where obviously the video and the things that we've been talking around is around Yenya, and you'll find that on social media and things like that, YEGNA, and that's around the Girl Effect global movement. So there's many different things. Clearly, if you want to really know about the details, you should probably go to the Ministry of Children and Youth and Women's Affairs so that you can find out on the ground what's happening in Ethiopia. But there's a lot of organizations. You can follow me on Munit Mesfin on all social media, and I'm always sharing. I'll probably be sharing about your schools there as well, so that people can find out about it. And I would love to continue to be in touch with all of you again to see if there's any way to support. So my particular task now is to launch my early childhood movement and advocate for that, so that our children can be from the earliest stage affected in the most positive ways and shaped in the most human rights-based kind of approaches. But really, truly amplifying the good works of people is something that is a passion of mine. So that would be where I'll be at. So it's been such a pleasure to be here with everybody and to hear the wonderful work that all of you are doing and are going to continue to be doing. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you all. It's a privilege having you all in here. For the viewers, I mean, this is just sometimes it's basic, it's common sense that I would think like girls should be educated. I mean, girls should have the same right to education. They can be informed, they can make their own choices, they should choose when they can and should be married, who they should marry, and it helps. Even if we just look at it at the economical factor of it, I think the last number that I saw, by not educating our girls, each country is almost losing close to, some countries like losing over $1 billion a year, So this is just like the aspect of it. As parents, as father, for me, the other men, the messages that I have, we need to be able to give our girls the same kind of right for our boys that we're going to be, that they have to have the same right. I mean, sexual abuse, so many things that can be avoided, early pregnancy, and then that even by itself brings them into so many things that we talk about. Girls having kids when they are themselves 10, 11-year-old, they cannot even imagine that. And then that's like down, it's like a domino effect that creates in so many areas. So we all need to be able to stand for this. We all should be able to say this is what we want for our girls, and our girls being educated, not only economic aspect, but the humanitarian aspect of it. It does help. And so I'm going to give each of you 1 minute, just closing, what message that you have for everyone. I really thank you, and I'm humbled to have all of you in here because you're all working and then doing so many works. My job is just to make sure to spread this to everyone that needs to listen and get involved. Ida saying, I want to say this to you. She's my high school friend, grew up together. This is for you, Rebecca. She has visited the schools, and she's very happy that that the school is opening, so she will be able to be one of the, she's saying a little school starts next month. So I just wanted to echo that for all of you out there. So what message, the parting message that you have for everyone watching, word of wisdom, whatever you want to do. But first I want to say thank you very much for coming to the Yoftahe show. I really, really appreciate for all of you being here. Jerry, what message, summarize words do you have for closing the show?
Well, first, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm honestly like, I feel like I'm the one taking all the information in because I'm genuinely so honored to be just sitting amongst you guys to hear everything that you've done. And I know you guys have done more things that you're probably not sharing with us. And that's just incredible to hear as someone who's passionate about serving. And for the youth, I would say, so like I mentioned, I'm going to be graduating, and for the next 6 months, I'm actually planning to go back home and just serve and learn about my country and find, the things that I didn't get an opportunity to do. So I really want to challenge the youth to, before we kind of join the workforce and, do all of that busy stuff, kind of challenge ourselves to go back and figure out our passion to serve. And there's so many different things that we learned here today that we can be a part of, which I'm excited. I'm definitely going to be getting in contact with you guys so I can help in any way that I can. And also just keep in mind, like when we talk about service, a lot of us talk about, like starting a nonprofit or going out there and just being the face or the voice or starting something fresh. But service can genuinely be, just donating, like we mentioned, or spreading the word, posting about it, or just, kind of bringing attention to it. Service can be used in so many different ways. And so we don't all have to be creating something from ground up to be a part of the movement. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. You're the future. So I really appreciate you being here. So we will talk more. I'll introduce you also to all of them, Rebecca, the youth team. So we will talk more. Tamara, any departing message? Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate everything that you're doing, and God bless you with all the work that you're doing. So what do you have, any message?
I want to say thank you to you and thank you to everybody here. And I do hope that we can speak later. We did a project recently called Her Path, and it asked the question, has your birthplace affected your poverty or prosperity? And I think that's something that our organization works with. And I think that applies to so many of us. And if you're able, find something that connects with you, lift another person, especially what we're speaking to today here, girls. I've seen girls change their poverty cycle in one generation, and they are affecting, they will keep more girls in school. An educated girl will change her path. And I think that's just key for all of us to know and to act on if you're able. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, Rebecca, bless you for whatever you're doing. You're touching so many, and then that's cool that I definitely also want to visit. So what message do you have just to close the show?
Thank you. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you, Ida, out there, for your nice words. I just love what Monique just said about, well, first of all, you've given us an opportunity to learn about each other's work. And, Tamara and I should have encountered each other a lot sooner, given our overlaps. I thank you for that. And I really love what Monique just said about amplifying the work that's being done out there and learning and supporting each other. To your point, Jerry, there is a lot out there, and we all want to contribute. And it's just great to support each other as well. So I hope that we continue to do that. As I said earlier, I am so moved by the number of people that have helped us get to this point. And, I'd like to be there for others who are doing similar work. So thank you. And I look forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Monique, to close the show, I appreciate you with everything that you're doing. We were supposed to have you sing, but we will sing it for next time.
It's good to just talk sometimes.
So what message would you have for the team, for everyone in here, just to close the show?
I mean, the essence of, you've started with Girls Matter, and I would say, yep, we do, absolutely. And it starts from home, and it starts from your community, and it starts from your surrounding influences, whatever. Everybody has influence. We all have influence. Within our neighborhoods, we have influence. Within our families, within the places of work where we live. And so it's to not keep this as a secondary thing, but just have it be part of who we are all the time, that we're always intentionally making sure that whenever we can positively impact anything around us to ensure a better world, a better equity for our girls, etc., we take that chance and we run with it. Because I think we might be overwhelmed. It's overwhelming if you think about it. Like, how many millions of girls, how many millions of, lives are so negatively impacted by gender inequity. But I think to not be overwhelmed, to do whatever you can whenever you can, each to his capacity, to her capacity, I think is the way that we do it. And I think, it is about education, and it is definitely about persistence and consistency. Like, you can't just start and stop this dialogue. It took hundreds and thousands of years of learning for us to be where we are now. It's going to take hopefully a lot less for us to evolve into a space where women and men just live and live in equity. But it will take long. So I think thinking of this as a marathon, do what you can whenever you can, is what I would say. Make sure you take care of what you're saying to your sons and your daughters. Make excellent men out of your sons and make excellent women out of your daughters. That's all I have to say about that.
I love that. That's a good way of saying it. I mean, I'm going to dedicate this show myself for my mom for being so strong and raising a son. And Lemlembelai is her name. And then for my two daughters, Maya and Yane, I love you very much. And I know you're going to grow up, be the leader of the world the way you intended. And I try to do as much as I can to support you be the woman you need to be. So that's the promise for all the men and everyone that needs to have it. So the end of the show is coming. You had an amazing panelist. I mean, I've learned so much myself in here. So before we depart, I want to say, please take care of each other. I know, I understand our world, especially in Ethiopia, so many things are going on, but please take care of each other. Use the social media, use everything else to try to improve someone else's life instead of just tearing each other down. So that's all I want to say. Wednesday, I will see you. I'm bringing you a life story of Seb Zodi. He's an amazing coach, boxer, Olympic. Join us at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday night. You're going to learn. They just made this movie, actually, a documentary movie that is going to come out, I think this week on December 8th, actually, in 2 days. So join us on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time to learn about his life story. And so once again, for the viewers and for the guests, I really appreciate everything you are. Keep on doing that, what you're doing, because it makes a lot of difference in the world. All of us, Jerry mentioned it earlier, we don't have to be starting new. You've seen the amazing ladies in here who presented, and they have already doing amazing work. Anything you can do to support them. Rebecca's, Tamara's, and then Munit's, they have already told you what they are working on. Please be that person. If you are able to support them financially, please do so. If you are able to volunteer, do so. All you can do is spread the word, please do so. So reach out to me on how to get in touch with all these amazing ladies. I'll make sure to give you their contact, their website, which I'll be posting it. Once again, I wish you all a blessed time. Please make sure to take care of each other. Until we meet again Wednesday night, I say, Yoftahe, wishing you all a blessed time. Okay.
Thank you, Yoftahe.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.